County Council introduction of ordinance number 884, an ordinance of the County of Riverside regulating targeted residential picketing. Before we get started with our staff report from County Council, I want to make a few comments on this, if I may. This ordinance has been proposed strictly from a public safety standpoint and has unfortunately morphed into an inappropriate discussion of the Church of Scientology. Protests in front of the Church of Scientology, not counting any residential units that they have, or any other religious institutions, are not affected by this ordinance. Any comments made by the public in reference to the concerns of the Church of Scientology should be reserved for the public comments portion of this meeting. This is a county-wide ordinance. I've always believed that public officials learn a lot by the action taken by other public agencies to enhance public safety. We have seen many emotional issues that result in very proactive, emotional, and constitutionally protected protests that I and my colleagues 100% support. However, government must take the necessary precautions with regard to public safety witnessed and addressed in other municipalities. I don't want to wait for an incident that could result in the morbidity or mortality of one of our constituents or citizens, whether a protester gets hurt or whether one being protested against gets hurt. In recent years, an increasing number of protests targeted at particular homes have occurred in residential neighborhoods in the regions. These protests have had very adverse impacts on targeted residents. Many jurisdictions, including the County of San Diego, the City of Riverside, the City of Los Angeles, have adopted local laws which establish buffer zones to protect the well-being of residents in their homes and also respect the First Amendment rights and safety of demonstrators. This ordinance would require that persons participating in targeted residential protests maintain a distance of 30 feet, short in comparison to all other ordinances that have been reviewed that went from 50 feet to 500 feet from the targeted dwelling. I've asked staff to put some markings on the floor. Jay, do you see those behind you? There should be some slashes there on each side of the... will you and our Paul McDonald please stand on each of those? I want to show the audience what 30 feet is. This is the distance that one has to maintain from a property line to protest against a residential home. This is not a large distance. Thank you, gentlemen. This ordinance will reduce the risk of violent confrontations over emotionally charged issues and reduce the risk that targeting residents will become captives in their own homes, forced to endure the threats of a hostile group in a space where they should be able to enjoy tranquility, especially those who are elderly or infirm. These ordinances have been tested by the courts, and those decisions provide the necessary guidance to formulate local policy which protects the residents and protesters' rights, including the safety of both. This ordinance will not limit the content of free speech or unreasonably restrict expressive activity. Let's learn from other municipalities in enacting this local law to prevent the knee-jerk reaction after a preventable future injury or death occurs in our county with our potential inaction. I would request a report back in 6 months by our sheriff with the efficacy and ease of enforceability of this ordinance. Ms. Waltz?
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. At the last hearing, County Council and the Sheriff were requested to report back to the board on the limited application of this ordinance. Ordinance 884 regulates targeted residential picketing. It is not intended to prohibit any general protests against Scientology or any other topic. It is intended to restrict picketing activity that is focused on a particular residence or household, and it requires that the picketing proceed in a course directly in front of or around the residence. Similar ordinances have been upheld by the Ninth Circuit and the United States Supreme Court. Because they involve First Amendment protected activity, such ordinances are generally narrowly construed. During a previous hearing, we mentioned that the picketing activity was taking place primarily at the west end of the Golden Era property in front of the entrance and a dining hall. The residences are located on the eastern end of the property. The ordinance expressly provides that it shall not be interpreted to preclude picketing in a residential area that is not targeted at a particular residential dwelling. For example, if you had a protest march that preceded the length of Gilman Springs Road and is not targeted at a particular residential dwelling, that would not be affected by this ordinance. Nor would picketing at the entrance of a commercial use or in front of a dining hall be deemed targeting a particular residential dwelling in violation of the ordinance. This ordinance is not intended to prescribe a pro-Scientology or an anti-Scientology message. It is purely intended to protect the privacy, security, peace, and solitude that one should be able to enjoy in their home. The Sheriff Department believes that this can be a useful tool to generally ensure the privacy and security of residents in their own home. I just want to comment briefly on item 3.56. That was we have Ordinance 889, and that is to repeal Ordinance 888, which was the urgency ordinance. There is no longer an urgency that warrants the urgency ordinance. The enforcement was suspended, and the area in which the activity will be regulated, the picketing activity will be regulated, has been reduced from 50 feet to 30 feet. So it really renders the urgency ordinance inapplicable and not useful. And with that, I know that we have representatives from the Sheriff's Department. I see Pete LeBon and Valerie Hill, and I know they'd like to say something, so at this time I'd like to give them that opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Waltz. Under Sheriff, Valerie Hill.
Honorable members of the board, council, Mr. Luna, our comments are simple. We enjoyed working with council to vet through, and we appreciate the process that we had in vetting through this ordinance. We see it as something that can be utilized within the county area when it comes to targeted residents and those subjects living in those residents to have peace and tranquility. And we, again, our comments are simple. We thank you for the opportunity we've had to vet this through with county council.
Thank you, Undersheriff. Any questions for our Undersheriff?
I'm always interested in specific cases giving rise to the need for new laws. What specific cases can you show us, produce, that call for this?
I can't give you any specific cases.
And I might add that you weren't the author of the ordinance. You didn't bring it forward. It was brought forward because of instances that are well documented on the internet of residential harassment and violence that has happened in neighboring counties such as Los Angeles. So rather than wait for an event to happen here and wait for somebody to be hurt or killed, why not take the necessary precautions to hopefully prevent that type of morbidity and mortality from happening? Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Hill.
Thank you.
We do have some speakers on this issue. I'll first call up Graham Berry, Esquire, from Los Angeles. And he's been given 3 minutes by Patricia Curtis. So you have a total of 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, sir. This ordinance was requested and drafted by the Church of Scientology and its lawyer, the same lawyer who represents one of the members of this board. The ordinance and the reasons for it is a crock. There is no freedom of religion issue, no hindering of worship, no interference with residential tranquility. After all, it is Scientology that has been blasting eardrum shattering noise to drive protesters away. Instead, this ordinance is directed at a group of people that are trying to picket against crime and abuse, and doing it on the highway in front of a business. The real rub is that Scientology wants to shut down attention being drawn to the existence and operations of Golden Era Productions at Gilman Hot Springs. It wants to hide the slave labor the forced abortions, the civil and human rights abuses, the suspicious deaths, and the secrecy.
Mr. Chairman. I think we're off track. It's
let's address residential targeting, picketing. You're getting off on Scientology. This is not aimed at Scientology. It's aimed at residential targeted picketing. And I wish you would address the ordinance before us and not go off on some religious tangent.
This is not a religious tangent, sir. It is integral to the entire issue, as indicated by the Press Enterprise on January 17 of this year, when an editorial in that paper said, the county has rushed ahead without answering some basic questions. Does the county need this ordinance? The county should determine whether existing laws are sufficient to handle protests before putting new rules in place. How would the new ordinance work? The county council and the church's lawyers could not even agree on whether the rules permitted protests at the compound's front gate. Imposing hazy restrictions invites enforcement squabbles and lawsuits, neither of which the county needs. The church's own tax-exempt application describes Golden Era Productions as a film, audio editing, and film laboratory facility.
Again, sir, if you want to bring it up in public comments, you can, but it has no pertinence to this residential ordinance that we are entertaining today. So if you focus on the ordinance, I would really appreciate it.
Mr. Berry, I would like to just clarify that we have now clarified the application of the ordinance since that press article. And so it is very limited in its application.
It may be limited, but it is going to be controversial. I have picketed there. I have picketed there since the last meeting. The sheriffs tried to restrict the content of our message to say we could not mention the name of any resident there. One of those residents is David Miscavige. We're not allowed to mention his name there. He's the head of the church. He happens to live there. He happens to live on business premises as a requirement of his employment. It is a crock to say that this is not directed at Scientology. It is sought by Scientology to stop their people being exposed to protests. You can say it's residential. That doesn't change the fact it's a mixed-use neighborhood. A mixed-use neighborhood that is engaged in business and hiding human rights abuses. Have you forgotten what happened at Jonestown, what happened at Waco, what happened at Heaven's Gate? Because what happened at those places is happening on this property. And to call it one thing when it is another is a crock.
It will only be enforced against targeted residential picketing, not general picketing, not picketing of a commercial use, but when the picketing targets a particular residence and proceeds in front of and around that residence.
And when you have residences mixed in with the businesses, you provide the opportunity for dispute and litigation over what exactly is meant, where things are located, and the like. It produces litigation that it costs both the county and those involved precious dollars and snuffs out the constitutional right of those involved.
This will be the last comment I make. The residences are on the eastern end of the property. They are not ambiguous.
And they are set well back from the road. Some sheriffs allow us to walk down in front of the residences, which are set well back from the road. Others don't. That is where this problem comes. It becomes a problem in interpretation and application, and therefore the product of probable litigation. And that is why it needs to be reviewed as to how it can be best applied. And it can be best applied by providing specific areas that are open for picketing, for the board to make it clear that, consistent with the language of the resolution, you can stand outside the main gates and picket. You can walk up and down both sides of the highway and picket, provided you don't target a specific residence.
We agree. We agree that you can walk up and down as long as you don't target a particular residence.
And because of past experience, that should be made clear, those locations, so that the sheriffs have a clear mandate as to what they can and cannot apply, despite what the Scientologists may be screaming and yelling on their telephones at them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Lara Bishop? Lara Bishop? Okay, take your time, Lara. Lara will be followed by Maureen Bolstad, and Lara has been given 6 minutes, another 3 by Juanita Starr.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Forgot my glasses, so my eyesight's kind of bad. Good morning. My name is Lara Bishop, and I reside in Paris. Attorney Samuel Alhadeff is legal counsel to the Church of Scientology in this matter of Ordinance 884. He has worked side by side with County Council and has been instrumental in drafting the very ordinance that would directly benefit his client. Attorney Alhadeff co-founded law firm of Alhadeff and Solar and is a managing shareholder of the firm. In June of 2007, Alhadeff and Solar combined with Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney. And even though at least 4 out of the 5 supervisors, including Supervisor Stone, have received campaign contributions from Attorney Alhadeff and or his 2 law firms, with respect to Ordinance 884 and Attorney Alhadeff, one thing sets Supervisor Stone apart from the rest of the county supervisors. Supervisor Stone has been represented by both of Attorney Alhadeff's law firms. First, in the matter of Royal Care versus Wickham, RIC 389956, and most recently in the matter of Stone versus Flash Flood Management. And that case number is RIC 445793. That case was concluded on October 15, 2008, 41 days prior to Supervisor Stone introducing the anti-picketing ordinance. In light of the present political atmosphere, and in the interest of full disclosure, an elected official has a moral and ethical obligation to disclose any relationship which is a conflict of interest or could reasonably be construed as a conflict of interest. The Church of Scientology is located within Supervisor Stone's district, so therefore it is not unreasonable that they would approach him with an issue. After all, he is their representative. What is unreasonable is, and suspect, is Supervisor Stone's failure to disclose to the public his association with their attorney, Samuel Alhadeff. I'm curious to know if Supervisor Stone disclosed his association with Attorney Alhadeff to his fellow colleagues on the board. Did he disclose this information to County Council? Because he certainly did not disclose it to the public. I have reviewed every portion of the videotape archives of the meetings pertaining to this ordinance, and never once did Supervisor Stone disclose his association with Attorney Alhadeff. If he didn't tell you, I would turn to Supervisor Stone right now and ask him why he kept this from you. And if he did, on the other hand, tell you about it, why didn't any one of you disclose it to the public? As a member of the public whose First Amendment rights will be affected if Ordinance 884 is passed and implemented, Supervisor Stone's motivations behind the ordinance are in question. I question Supervisor Stone's biased treatment of Attorney Alhadeff and the Church of Scientology. I question the lack of involvement of other religions and their attorneys in the drafting of the ordinance. I question Supervisor Stone's unwillingness to consider the church protesters' evidence in support of their position in this matter. And I am not involved with those protesters, so I don't have any stake in this, except for my First Amendment right. And I question Supervisor Stone's lack of candor with the public. From my vantage point, Ordinance 884 has all the earmarks of quid pro quo. Something for something. It reeks of Chicago-style politics and reminds me of Blagojevich and Burris. Ordinance 884 is fueled by loaded words, predictions of violence, and examples of intolerance which are unsupported by fact. I cannot imagine any member of the board feeling secure in their vote that Supervisor Stone acted in good faith when he introduced Ordinance 884. Supervisor Buster, with all due respect, should you feel comfortable voting in favor of this ordinance today, I will not feel comfortable voting for you again in the next election or any time in the future. As a final comment, Supervisor Stone, on November the 25th, 2008, when you introduced the ordinance, you made a comment about David Allen Dokich, the protest. On the video of the meeting, at approximately 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 17 seconds, you said, and I quote, "I'll tell you that every home that was adjacent to the home that Mr. Dokich was in was very happy and was setting up lawn chairs and places for Ken and John of KFI, and couldn't be more accommodating with noise and air guns and loudspeakers. For the record, my son and I protested Dokich every day for 8.5 months, every day. And we protesters never carried any guns of any kind. So for you to go on public record and make that claim was very irresponsible. Either you were lying, or when you said it, you had no clue as to what you were saying, because it never happened. Regardless, you said it to add fuel to the fire of Ordinance 884, and that was wrong. You owe all of the David Allen Dokich protesters a public apology.
Are you finished?
Do I get an apology?
Maybe. Are you finished?
I am.
Hey, sit down, please. Thank you. Before I call the next speaker up, please, no clapping. I want to address a couple of the comments that in the 17 years that I've been a public official, we are required to fill out disclosure forms that show when we receive a contribution or a gift from anyone in the public. I have made it a personal issue to not accept gifts from anyone. Now, I can hire an attorney, I can hire an accountant, as long as I'm paying their fees, and I have paid Mr. Alhadeff's firm tens of thousands of dollars on many different issues that I've been involved in long before I was on the Board of Supervisors. He happens to be a very prominent attorney in Southwest Riverside County. I might point out for the board to know that I first met Mr. Alhadeff when we were entertaining a Walmart issue in the city of Temecula. And I opposed Mr. Alhadeff's bringing Walmart on what is now the regional mall in Temecula. So to say that I've always agreed with Mr. Alhadeff in the public, including him representing clients before this board, including some wineries that were shut down because they were not in compliance with codes, is ludicrous. So I don't have to report to the board. I don't have to report to the county attorney when I hire a professional for my own private business. I only have to report if and only if I receive a gift or special consideration by such a professional, which has never been done. So I want to clear that issue up. I still believe I've been misquoted by the prior speaker with regard to guns and the David Dokich issue. I was out there. I was a vocal opponent of Mr. Dokich being placed within a 48-hour period of time in an area that was not prepared for him being there. And I was very proud to be there to protest, and I would do it all over again. Maureen Bolstad is our next speaker, and she's been given 3 minutes by Doug Owens. And yes, the Church of Scientology is a constituent, and my doors are open to them as well as any other church in the 3rd District.
Hello.
Hello.
I was a member of the Church of Scientology International for 18 years. I worked there and I lived there. The protesters that I witnessed while I was working there did not disrupt me. They did not bother me. What bothered me was that management did not want me to see their signs. I am in a situation now where I'm no longer a member, and my twin sister is still a member. Her last known address was the Church of Scientology International base in Hemet, and she hasn't spoken to her family in 4 years. And I like to protest the fact that Scientology has a disconnection policy that has broken up my family. And if I walk up and down that street with a picket sign and Scientology redefines their property as a residence, I will get fined and I could possibly go to jail for doing that. It is an interruption of my freedom of speech, and there is no alternative given for me to get my message across. Because on that property, I cannot go door to door and talk to people. I cannot hand individuals their leaflets. I cannot call directly to any staff member there, because they do not have the same freedoms as other people who actually in a residence have. They cannot answer their front door themselves. Their mail is censored. They do not have access to a public phone. All of their incoming and outgoing calls go through someone in security. They do not have a manually operated pedestrian gate where they can leave the property freely. They have to go through a security guard, and that security guard is trained to stop them if they do not have authorization. So I cannot simply call up somebody and say, come on out here, I want to talk to you. The only way I can get my message across, and the only way I can protest the fact that my twin sister is not allowed to talk to me or anyone in my family directly, is by picketing and protesting and making my point.
And this ordinance allows you to do that.
Okay, but it is unclear as to whether the property line indicates the edge of a residence or whether the places on the east side of the property are the residence and that picketing is okay all along the road there.
County Council will clarify that for you.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. It's only going to be regulated by the ordinance if you have picketing activity that proceeds in front of and around or around the residence, not the entire length of the property, but targets the residence. The residences are located on the eastern portion of the property. My understanding is the picketing activity is going on the western end of the property. So I think you can clearly define where the residences are, and you cannot target them under this ordinance.
Okay, well, when I was working there, they could regulate where the residences were. I mean, they can change that. For example, I lived on the north side of the property, the northeast side of the property. Is that labeled a residence now? Are they going to speak up and say, well, that's a residence now, so nobody can picket in front of there either?
There are building permits that were issued for residences. And so building and safety, for example, has maps that show where the residences are located.
Okay, so then how does this ordinance change anything from what is going on now? For example, I did a picket recently and I walked up and down the street. Would the sheriff be able to come up to me after this ordinance passes and fine me or send me to jail?
May not change anything.
Okay, then why do we need the ordinance? I mean, why create a new law that has to
To
be enforced?
protect individuals in their homes.
All right, well, there's no danger to individuals in their homes. The home is far away from the fence.
We're not talking about Scientology. We're talking about a normal neighborhood where pickets that want to target your home and wherever you live have to stay 30 feet away. Period. That's all it says.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mark Bunker. And Mr. Bunker, you've been given 3 minutes by Susan Elliott.
Thank you. I prepared some statements, but I've thrown those all out because, frankly, I'm appalled. I'm shocked at your behavior. This ordinance was brought to you by Scientology, drafted by Scientology, and you're saying this is not about Scientology? Let's not talk about Scientology?
This is not the original ordinance that came before us. It has been drastically changed, and its intent has been changed, and therefore that's what you ought to address.
Mr. Stone, were you involved in the pickets of the child molester that one of the other people brought up?
Yes, I was.
Did you feel that you should have stayed 30 feet away from that home?
We did.
All right. It's shocking to me. Will you please put into this ordinance that Scientology is exempt from this ordinance then? Will you say, yes, you're free to picket at the gates of Scientology?
Sir,
don't go onto the property.
This is a residential ordinance. I'm going to say it time and time again. You keep bringing in the Church of Scientology. The Church of Scientology is in one specific location in the 3rd District. We're talking about a county-wide ordinance that needs to be universally applied to anyone that is protesting against a residential unit.
It didn't need to be universally applied until Scientology drafted it and brought it to you, right?
I've heard that mentioned many times. Pam,
because it's the truth.
Will you please explain who drafted the ordinance? It was not Mr. Alhadeff.
I went ahead and drafted that ordinance, and I based it on the, I believe it was the County of San Diego ordinance.
The first ordinance that Mr. Stone brought to us, or this revised version?
The original ordinance that was brought, I drafted based on, I believe it was the County of San Diego or City of San Diego
I gave her the
ordinance.
copy of the
Was
San Diego.
Scientology involved in the drafting of it?
No, it was a copy of San Diego's ordinance that was 500 feet, where we're talking about 30 feet here today.
So Scientology had nothing to do with bringing this ordinance originally.
They did not
That's
have any
why
interest in that ordinance.
you went to great extremes in December when you introduced this ordinance, the original ordinance, to defame members of Anonymous. You stood up here and you spread Scientology's nonsense, their garbage, their dead agent material about Anonymous, because this was about unrelated residences. Anonymous is not a hate group. I'm not going to defend any of the vile language or images that you showed in December.
It's their material, sir.
But Anonymous, you didn't put them in context at all. Anonymous is not a hate group. It's your son, it's your daughter, it's your neighbor, it's the cop on the beat, it's military men and women, it's judges, it's teachers, it's priests. All of these people in Anonymous have contacted me over this past year to tell me that they are doing this, they are speaking out because of Scientology's abuses. You owe Anonymous an apology for the way you spread Scientology smears against them, bringing a version of this ordinance to the floor here. And it's shocking to me that you will pretend that Scientology has nothing to do with this. So why don't you put in the ordinance that the gates at Scientology are exempt? That's not a residence right there. And actual homes throughout the rest of the county would be fine.
We'll take your comments into consideration. I appreciate you coming forward.
I'm sure you shall.
Julie Waltz will be followed by Donald Meyers. Good morning.
Good morning, honorable council members. I'm not council, Board of Supervisors, I'm sorry.
You've been called worse. It's okay.
I do advocate a lot for the First Amendment right, so I got a little confused. Well, gentlemen and ladies, I'm a little bit, I feel the ramrodding of this ordinance. It's being written on speculation. Residential targeted picketing. And this morning I read in the paper about how Mr. Alhadeff and Mr. Stone and church officials say this ordinance is needed to keep peace and protect the privacy of freedom of religion. Okay, I really don't think anybody's trying to stop anybody from practicing their religious beliefs. A protester has a right to protest, and it shouldn't be limited. Okay? An organization running a business in a neighborhood is not a residence, it's a business. We do not need this ordinance. We have state laws and penal codes that have been upheld by the courts for all protesters who violate the law while protesting. We have Penal Code 415, which is disturbing the peace, Penal Code 602, which is for trespassing. You guys look like you're not even listening to me. Penal Code 240 through 248, which is assault and battery. And then there's Penal Code 594, which I believe is for destruction to religious properties. These are the only sections needed to regulate and control any and all protest sites. These penal codes have worked in the past and will continue to work in the future. Any organization or business or person who is being protested has the constitutional right to call the sheriff's department or the police department and make a police report or a citizen's arrest They can also hire a lawyer, or I'm sure if they can't afford one, one can be appointed to them. Special interest shouldn't dictate policy for Riverside County or control any government elected official. County council and the sheriffs are overzealous in their efforts to protect one group. Why ultimately violate the rights, the constitutional rights of every citizen, so one group can overshadow everyone else's rights? In today's world, it's apparent that government wants to control every aspect of an individual's behavior and existence. It's not your duty to reinterpret the Constitution of the United States of America to protect your special interest group. And Supervisor Stone, just for the record, I too was one of the people at the Dave and Alan Dokich protest. And I don't recall any air guns going off. The only thing I recall was bullhorns. And the day John and Ken were there were loudspeakers, and that was just one day. And the chairs were furnished by the speakers, by the protesters, because those protesters, we had no other way to petition the government than to go out there and protest, because some people don't have the funds or the attorneys to back them up. The only thing they have is their voice to be heard. And that's how Jessica's Law became about. You even spoke on the KFI show that day.
Julie, your time is up. You're right. I was on your side, and I'll continue to be on your side for these types of
Okay,
instances.
now, I'll wrap this up as quickly as possible. I would just, I am an advocate. You allowed the lobbyist. I'm like a lobbyist. Okay, as for the only people out there that carried guns were the sheriffs to keep in case anything got out of control, which it didn't. And it was 8.5 months. There was never no violence.
I agree.
And as for the San Diego, the Palm Desert, and the Riverside Ordinance, to my knowledge, no surrounding residents have challenged these ordinances in a court of law.
Your time is
Okay, just a second. In closing, just an afterthought. In today's economy, is this county in a position to spend millions of taxpayer dollars? Should this ordinance be challenged or litigated in a court of law by we the people?
Thank you, and I appreciate your comments. For the record, I will remind you that it has been upheld in the 9th Court of Appeals and the U.S. Supreme Court.
I realize that, but it has never been challenged by residents in the surrounding areas that you insist on, that we can't target picketing. If we didn't target Dave and Alan Dokich, our voices would have never been heard. That was a targeted residential picket.
Exactly, and this does not stop that. It just says you have to be within a certain radius of the home. We showed you what 30 feet was,
But
Laura.
excuse me, Mr. Stone, but the organization is not a business. It's not a home. It's a business.
A transitional home that was a business. Okay? Laura, I'm sorry, your time's up. I need to call the next speaker.
Okay, well, I'm going to leave you with the penal codes, a copy of the penal codes.
You leave those.
Please, think what you're doing.
Thank you. Mr. Donald Meyers is next, followed by Catherine Fraiser. It should be. It'll be on in a second. Just keep tapping it for a second.
I'll just use this.
There might be a switch. You need to turn it on there.
Sting?
There you go.
There we go. Okay.
I'm not coming back to speak. I left my purse.
I don't want my time stolen.
Your time's not stolen.
Can everyone see the...
Start your time over.
Okay, can everyone see what's on the display here? My code name for protesting is Angry Gay Pope, and any of the photos I'm going to show you can be seen at angrygaypope.com. I'm only going to talk about residences. I absolutely promise. You were right, Ms. Waltz, that the residences are on the one side, those big blue buildings. But there are also residences the Scientologists don't talk about on the opposite end of the property across from the castle. These are areas where Scientologists are taken to be rehabilitated when they are not doing what they're told. These do not look like houses, but they actually are. They're like containers that people are forced to live in. And they probably don't have them permitted as housing, but people are living there, including that woman who spoke earlier. So these are houses, and I think that the sheriffs should examine these so that we know where these residences are, so that we know not to target and picket them. This is the fence around the residence. You can see it's covered with barbed wires. These barbs protect the residents completely. There's no need for any additional protection. And the barbs are bent at a certain angle so that you can't see them very well from the road. However, from the side, it's very devastating how dangerous these are. And yet Scientology claims that they do not have enough protection yet, even with floodlights and giant spikes on their fences. This is probably the worst photo of all from this rehabilitation project area. This is a giant chunk of fence covered with razor-sharp spines, spikes, floodlights, motion detector. I've seen infrared detectors. This is not a church. This is a prison, or they have a really terrible pigeon problem. There's no additional need for any legislation because the Scientologists are already far from the road, protected by all of their security. This issue doesn't stop us from protesting. It's just become a hassle for everyone involved and an embarrassment. I urge you to defeat this issue. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about these photos?
Thank you, Mr. Meyers. Appreciate you coming down from West Hollywood. Catherine Fraiser, who's been given 3 minutes by Muriel Dufresne.
Good morning. My name is Catherine Fraiser. I live at 19625 Gilman Springs Road. I want to give a few facts about some things you've heard today. You heard from Graham Berry. Now, let me tell you a few facts about this man. He's been found to be a vexatious litigant by the courts.
Officer, we need to keep decorum, please. We've given you the respect when you spoke. Please give the speaker the respect when she speaks.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we should get involved in personal attacks on people speaking. If you would address the ordinance.
Yes.
Yeah, I would also urge you address the ordinance itself. If you have issues with it, or you like it, or you don't like parts of it, let us know what that is. But these ad hominem comments do not help anything you're going to say.
Okay, good. And I understand that. What I will do then is I'll give you specific things about the people that you've heard from so you can understand who you're dealing with.
We don't want to know about the people that spoke. They had a right to speak. You have a right to speak. We tried to get them to address the ordinance.
Yes.
We'd like you to address the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Okay, good. Now let me go back to a specific situation having to do with specifically the protesters. Now, we have video footage at where we live of the protesters when they have come here, and this has to do with the ordinance. We have video footage of them blocking our entrance for up to 30 minutes at a time. We have video footage of them lying down in the entrance. We have video footage of them calling out specific and targeting individuals. Now, when the sheriffs come, they change that. They move out of the way, they say they're not targeting, but it isn't what happens in reality. And that's what we have evidence of. Now, in fact, Gilman Springs Road is known as one of the most dangerous roads in Riverside County, and this is of concern. Since 2006, there have been over 80 traffic collisions on Gilman Springs Road. Cars have gone off the highway, gone up onto I'll show you by this picture. This is exactly where the protesters picket. They veer off the road, go on the walkway, and they hit the signs. They've gone over and actually knocked down trees. And this is right at the entrance. If anybody had been standing there, they would have been dead. Now, the fact of the matter is that when this ordinance was turned over to county council and the sheriff to work out, we requested to meet with the sheriff so we could show him the evidence on what we had with the protesters. With all due respect to Mr. Laban, I want the board to know that he did refuse to meet with us. Now, as the videos show exactly what happens, we thought it was very important that he see that himself. And I personally, as we are the victims, I think it's outrageous that he didn't want to meet with me. And I'm the victim, but he didn't want to meet with me. Finally, I want to leave you with something. There was a permanent injunction that was issued against Bunker in Florida, and the court said there, in relation very similar to this, the Constitution of the United States provides for free speech. However, the right of free speech must be exercised so as not to jeopardize societal interest in safety, tranquility, and peace. I am for the ordinance, and I want to work with the sheriffs to have it so that we are safe. We are safe from the bomb threats, the death threats, the violence that we have had from many individuals across the country. So yes, I do support this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fraiser. Our next speaker will be Sam Alhadeff. Mr. Sam Alhadeff.
I suppose I'm reminded of what Tommy Lasorda said. When you have a problem or a trouble, half the people don't care and half the people are happy you got it. This ordinance, so you know, was never drafted by me. This ordinance was always drafted by county council. If I am able to bat .333 like Tony Gwynn did, I think I'd be really successful. I'm not sure I even bat .333 when I come up before the board. I want to apologize to each of you for having to go through this. This is an ordinance, as presently drafted and as always drafted, that has been adopted by many municipalities and cities because in this times that we live in, people are exuberant about their protests and about what they want to say. Sometimes that exuberance exceeds the bounds of propriety, and it does, in fact, impact people who live in their homes. There is a constant balance under the Constitution. I think what you're trying to do is very wise in balancing what should be done. With regard to the particular allegations that have been made against me, I'm very proud of the fact that not only do we give to causes and people we believe in and have for 20-some years, we give to people and causes we believe in because we think they do the right thing. Sometimes they do the right thing and it hurts you individually or it hurts your client, but they still do the right thing. I'm very proud of all of you for having stuck in there today to listen to this. This is not any particular ordinance that's designed to protect one group over another. It never was. I wish I could take all the credit that was given to me by the people who said that I did all these things. Unfortunately, I didn't. But I will go home tonight and tell my wife that I am a legend, and she will announce to me, good, take out the trash tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alhadeff. Last speaker, Francois Jacquet.
Thank you for letting me speak.
Hello? Okay, good. Oh, Catherine, you forgot your sheet here. Can I keep it? Souvenir? All right. I'm going to talk about the ordinance. Okay.
Thank you.
Can you guys see this? All right. Here's the problem. Scientology owns the entire area here. Okay? Highway 79 runs right through it. Okay? Now, if we just look at that section of road there, and we just look at this part. Okay, I have a larger version if people have trouble seeing it. It should be pretty obvious. The road with both the full easement is 100 feet. The restriction is 30 feet, so we cannot protest 30 feet away from the property line. Note that midway through these 5 or 6 attempts at passing this ordinance, the words were changed from property residence to property line. Okay, so now we can't protest in the red area throughout this entire road here. Because they own both sides of the street, we can't protest on the other side either. So we're left having to protest in the middle of the street, either there or approximately a mile away here or a mile away there. That's the problem. This ordinance is not acceptable. I see you smiling, ma'am. I don't know why you're smiling, but this is a big problem. Okay? I need to get on to some other things. Just to put a little perspective here, I don't know if this is going to come up. Let me move this over. Why are we doing this? Why did this ordinance come about? Let me show you why. Okay? Okay.
Hey! Trespassing! You're under arrest for trespassing! No! You're under arrest for trespassing! Hey, guys! You're under arrest for trespassing! Hey! Bullshit! Come on, man!
Okay, so that's the maniacal Scientology guards attacking me. Okay? I've said that to you guys before. They attacked me. There's the video here. Okay? Now, let me go a little further on here, where we tried to file charges at the Hemet station. Mr. Laban's here, and I'd like to have him speak about that. But let's see here. I've got to get the time right. I think it's about here. Okay. Anyway, I tried to file charges here, and they refused that I could file charges. I was with Miss Curtis here, and she was terrified of the sheriff that they sent. They tried to arrest her, even though she didn't do anything. Scientology has somehow a very cozy relationship with the sheriff, the Hemet sheriff, and we want to find out what's going on here.
You have about 10 seconds.
10 seconds? Okay. I didn't cue it up right, but let me just say this here. Oh, actually, you're going to see here. It says she realizes how close she came to just being arrested.
That was scary shit. Hi, Grandma's Patricia. Oh, I'm not...
So this lady here was scared of a Hemet sheriff. Okay? Why is that? We want to find out why. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chiquette.
We were given all kinds of problems picketing there.
Mr. Chiquette, your time's up.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you
Oh, by the way, I just want to confirm what Ms. Bishop was saying. Mr. Alhadeff has paid you over $7,000 to help your campaign contribution. The same for Mr. Tavaloni. Similar large amounts. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you. That is public information for anybody that wants to see what contributions are being made to any respective public official. As I said before, by law, we are required to do that, and it does not prevent us from keeping an objective mind on the board. As I said, we have voted against Mr. Alhadeff on a number of occasions. We look at the issues objectively. Is there any other request to speak before I
Not on this item.
close the item? Okay, then I'll refer to the board for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, could we ask the County Council to address the last comment about property line versus residence?
Yes, thank you. As I started out with our presentation on the application of the ordinance, even though the distance runs from the property line, in order for this ordinance to be applicable, you have to have picketing activity that proceeds directly in front of or around a particular residence. A general march through Gilman Springs Road would not be necessarily a picketing activity that's targeting a particular residence.
Thank you. Any other questions of County Council? Well, my colleagues, we've been through this hearing quite a few times. I think we've massaged this ordinance that was a prototype of an ordinance that was used in San Diego County. I'll tell you honestly what was the instigation of me bringing this to the board. It was that during the issue of Proposition 8, that there was Mormon bishops that were being protested in their homes that led to some potential violence. We know that there are many issues that we get emotionally charged about, and I felt that there needed to be some safety and tranquility for people that live in residences that was highlighted by the issues that were happening at the Golden Era production. So this has been something that I've been considering bringing to the board for a long time. I think as we are in these economic times that we are going to see other very hotly contested issues both at the local, the state, and the federal level. This is an ordinance that is much more liberal than is in any other municipality in the area, including the County of San Diego, Los Angeles, San Bernardino. And I showed or exemplified what 30 feet is. It's not very far. If you want to have an effective protest against a targeted residence, you can effectively get your voice and your concerns known. It does allow for the safe ingress and egress of those being protested against. And I think that this is going to prevent somebody from getting hurt in our county, which was the motivation from the very beginning. It's all in the best interest of public safety. It's balancing the public safety needs of our residents and ensuring that we have the constitutional rights of expression and protest. You know, we don't always like to just bring things forward that are, you know, slam dunk 5-0 votes. We bring things forward that need to be addressed. This one's a very difficult ordinance to address. But in the best interest of public safety, I'm going to support it. And I urge my colleagues to do the same. Supervisor Buster.
Yeah, I had assumed that at some point during these somewhat protracted discussions on all the changes in the ordinance that we would hear from somebody who was a homeowner or apartment dweller who was disturbed by protest, either woken up when they were trying to sleep, day or night. We had day sleepers that complained to me about the sheriff's shooting range out there in Meade Valley now. So if people are very aware now, as they haven't been before, by train whistles, DHL sounds, and all the rest around my district about noise. And so I assumed that we get somebody down here to write me a note or show up here to testify and say, yes, I was disturbed by protesters, either by their noise or I was impeded either getting in or out of my house or my driveway. And yes, I called the sheriff or the police, if they live in the city, and that didn't help. Or I felt physically frightened in some way. I would assume somebody would showed up, but no one did. In fact, there was no one from the Church of Scientology who actually lived in those dwelling units who came down here and said the protesters really interfered with my daily life, my tranquility, what I expect as a church member and someone having to live out there. No one showed up. So, if there's a reason for this ordinance, I haven't seen it yet. Now, if there are cases where you see something going on in other counties, you say to yourself, boy, we better get in and prevent that from happening here, because once it's happened, the horse is out of the barn, or something could happen, and it'd be so traumatic that we really need to get in with an emergency ordinance and take care of it. Let me give you an example of that. Maybe it's not quite apropos, but we have a problem here with these invasive mussels and quagga and zebra mussels that are getting in the water system, the Colorado River. And boy, once they get in there, or in my industry, citrus, we have another insect that's coming up that could wipe out the whole citrus industry. So we better get out ahead of the ball and put proactive measures in here in Lake Elsinore and Canyon Lake and the boaters and so on and so forth to prevent these things from ever getting introduced. Because you just one, or I don't know if they're asexual, or two, and away you go. And you spend millions and millions, if not billions of dollars after that. Well, that's the same thing with this kind of ordinance. If there's some reason to circumscribe constitutional rights that are in the Basic Bill of Rights or in the Constitution, there ought to be a very, very high showing that either this is inevitable, it's going to happen here, it's going to happen quick, or if it does happen, even in one instance, that the consequences of it are so damaging, and that we do not, our other ordinances are clear showing that they're not going to deal with the issue, that there's justification for the ordinance we draw up. So I don't see this ordinance passing those sorts of tests, and I don't know where does 30 feet come from? 30 feet's not enough to mitigate noise of chanting protesters, or, it's difficult for people to measure off 30 feet. Where do you measure it from? Where's the property line? Difficult for the sheriff's enforcement people, lawyers, and all the rest to make a judgment about when people are going in and out of this 30 feet. Ordinance should be clear. There should be a need for them. There should be people who have been adversely affected and showing that the present ordinances are not sufficient to take care of the issue. So we have none of that in this case. So I would have voted for this if there was a clear showing, those kinds of showing, and if we'd had testimony from people who had gone through, you can imagine. You could be a gauntlet if they're protesting or groups protesting for days and weeks on end in front of your house and interfering with you, scaring your kids and all the rest. That hasn't happened, and we have no such testimony here for this ordinance. So absent those things, I cannot support this ordinance.
Thank you, Supervisor Buster. Any other requests to speak? If not, I'll make some final comments. Many of our ordinances in the County of Riverside are complicated, challenging to enforce. I'll mention the sound ordinance and having sound meters and training our Sheriff's Department how to use those in code enforcement. Supervisor brings up a good point. He hasn't had anybody come up that has been adversely affected by a protest, except we did have one resident that spoke here today that is a resident of the Golden Era Productions. The question is, do we want to invite an incident only to have a knee-jerk reaction to do something? I'll guarantee you that the County of San Diego and the City of Los Angeles and San Bernardino and the City of Riverside, they did not willy-nilly enact these ordinances because they felt they just needed to put in the ordinance on the books. They did it because they had incidents. Like I said, if you look on the internet, you'll see numerous incidents. I mentioned one with a Mormon bishop that was being accosted because of his stance and the church's stance on Proposition 8. Now, you're out of order, ma'am. I'm sorry. You've had your request to speak. So there is precedent for this type of an ordinance. And I've always been a very strong proponent of public safety. I've always been a very strong proponent of our constitutional rights of religious preference, of being able to petition. This has been tested in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. It's been tested by the U.S. Supreme Court. And I think the U.S. Supreme Court certainly is a good judge as to whether or not our constitutional rights have been taken away from us by virtue of enacting an ordinance like this that is much more liberal than those in our neighboring counties. But I feel very good that I brought this ordinance forward in the best interest of public safety, and I'm prepared to take the vote, and I'm going to vote affirmatively for it and know that I voted to prevent a person being injured or potentially killed in a very hotly, emotionally charged protest that's going to happen in this county. That one incident that I mentioned before happened in L.A. County, where they have 5 times our population. While we have a stagnant growth in our population right now, let me tell you, when the economy turns around, Riverside County is going to be the place where people are going to come and we're going to continue to grow. And this potentially could be an issue for us and our sheriffs and our legal counsel to have to deal with. So I think it's been well written. A lot of time's been spent drafting it. And with that, I'll move that we adopt ordinance number 884.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
With waiver of the reading.
Please.
Introduction of ordinance number 884, an ordinance of the County of Riverside regulating targeted residential picketing.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Please vote. And the ordinance passes 4 with 1 no. Item 3.56, County Council adoption of ordinance 889, an ordinance of the County of Riverside repealing ordinance number 888, an urgency ordinance regulating
Move approval.
targeted.
Second.
But do you have any requests to speak on that, Madam Clerk?
No, they were combined with the...
Okay, so we open the public hearing. Anybody want to address the board on this issue before I close the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and please vote. Let the record reflect that that's